Good morning everyone, welcome to chessroots.com. Today I'm gonna teach you how to play Alpin counter gambit. In Alpin counter gambit is nothing but d4, d5, c4, e5. Most often we don't see this type of gambit in game because it is very typical and tactical. Black tries to seize the initiative with a gambit and develop all his minor pieces quick and fast towards the center, where white will have some disturbances in the opening but later can have a free gameplay. So first of all, we'll see how to prevent this Alpine counter gambit. Now instead of c4, for those who don't want any type of tactical things in the opening with d4, they will play knight f3. This is a good way to prevent Alpine counter gambit. Now there is no e5, so black should be the black should be prepared for us for any other opening except Alpine counter gambit when white plays knight f3. So after, let us see the main layer variation, but that variation is still even good for white in most of the openings. So after e5, de5 and d4. The point of Alpine counter gambit is now black gives a pawn and all the movements of his pieces will be a little free, and now he tries to grab this pawn with the initiative. So knight f3, knight c6. There is a standard trap in this Alpine counter gambit, that is e3. Now if you play e3 and bishop b4 wins the game for black. After bishop d2, d into e3, bishop into b4, d into e2, king e2, and this will be a very even queen into d1, king into d1, d into e4, and black will be having a good chances to win the game. So so this will be the only trap available in this Alpine counter gambit. So after knight c6, g3. The reason why white plays g3 is because this bishop is very good on g2 and this long diagonal later. Knight g7, black tries to grab this pawn with knight g6 and later knight e5. Bishop g2, knight g6, castles, knight g e5, knight into e5, knight e5, and the point of playing Alpine gambit is now clear with queen b3. Now after queen b3, before we can play some GMs like as you play b3 and knight d2, but those all variations leads draw. Except draw, white don't have any successful game in these variations. So after queen b3, now the point is white is attacking this b7 pawn and locks the bishop on c8, even supports the c4. The idea of queen b3 is simply play rook d1 and take the control on the open file. Later he can play knight c3 to knight d5 or somewhere. So queen b3 is very good and improved move after b3 or nd2. So after queen b3, bishop e7. Black here can play bishop e6, but after queen b7, white is clearly better. Queen b7, knight d2, rook d1, or even queen b7. Now there is no knight c4, queen to a8 is going down, so rook b8 even, and queen into a7 is also possible, or queen a6, queen into a7, or even queen comes to e4 is also good. So there are lots of variations to continue after bishop e6 for white. He played bishop e7 and rook d1. Now the idea is to simply develop this knight using this pin. So this bishop is still bad on c8. So castles knight c3, bishop e6. Here white played knight d5. I think it's okay, but queen into b7 is even better, I guess. The reason is immediately next move you can play knight d5, and if knight into c4, white can play knight d5, and this will force white to land to a good position where he'll have a double bishop advantage, and there is a weakness on c7. If he played bishop d6, rook into d4, and later queen to a6, bishop to e3, rook double on d5. So white is I think white is clear better after queen into b7. So he played knight d5, which is equally good. c6. After bishop d6, queen b7, the position will be same where I showed you in the example. So c6, knight e7, queen e7. Now white is having a double bishop advantage with a bishop and knight. So he tries to grab this by opening up the position. Rook into d4. After rook d8, now if rook into d8 will hardly give any advantage for white. So he tries to develop his piece, and after bishop e3, a very good positional move, his rook will come into the action, and after rook into d4, bishop into d4, rook into d4, bishop into e4, this knight on e5 is bad, and this rook on 8 is struck because of this a6 pawn is hanging. So rook d4, bishop d4, knight into c4. Okay, now white don't want to keep this queen on the pin, so he played queen c3, attacking this g7. So f6, tried to reduce the moments of this bishop, and b3. b3 is equally good like f6, trying to reduce this bishop moment, and also later he can play b4, a4, and lay b5 to activate this bishop on g2. So knight b6, threatening knight into knight d5, so e4 is forced, and knight d7. Now black is threatening to play c5, which is equally strong. c5 and b6, maybe this bishop will be very bad that if that happens. So he prevented with b4 and a6. Now a6 frees this rook to open file, and maybe he can play later c5 like most b6 or c5. So after a6, a4, and bishop f7, threatening knight e5. So f4, bishop f7 also threatens like bishop h5, and try to activate this bishop on a diagonal where this rook should come to d1. Bishop f7 is very good, so f4 is preventing knight e5, and rook d8, and bishop f3. Now the bishop on f3 prevents bishop h5, and the pieces on d7 and f7 are very passive. So queen e6, black don't really have a good move, so he tries to exchange this queen on b3. Okay, now white is ready for the exchange because he's having a double bishop, and these two pawns, before going to endgame, let us compare. These two pawns will stop the pawns on a6, b7 and c6, whereas these 4 pawns will be not equal to these 3 pawns. We'll get a passed pawn on the king side for white, where black don't have get any passed pawn. So white is ready to go an end game with a double bishop advantage, with and a black and a bishop and knight, and he will also get a passed pawn on the king side. So knight f8, rook d1, and queen b3. After queen b3, rook d2, and queen into c3, bishop c3, rook into d2, bishop into d2, bishop e6, and king f2, knight d7. Now after knight d7, now I think black can play moves like b6 or c5, trying to exchange these 2 pawns with these 2 pawns and maybe create a passed pawn on the c or a file. So white prevents that with bishop e3 and f5 here. I think at this moment f5 is a little fast. What I suggest is to play king f7 and maybe king e7. Let white commit something and try to hold this position to a draw at least. f5 is little too early because f5 opens up the both diagonals of the bishop, and for one thing, for pawn majority, 4 pawns against 3 are to create a passed pawn against 4 pawns against 3 is little harder than creating a passed pawn with 3 pawns against 2. So black in this position should not try to exchange the pawns on the king side, while white will simply get a pawn majority and wins the game. So for many reasons I think f5 is very bad. After f5, ef5, bishop f5, and g4, bishop e6, f5 will activate both the bishops. Bishop c4, bishop d4, preventing knight f6, knight e5, and also many other knight movements, and fix this pawn on g7. Even now, if black tries to play knight f6, bishop f6 is very good for white, because the white will have a clear path towards b6, and b7 pawn is a big weakness. So king f7, bishop e3, h6, and h4, knight f8, king f4, knight d7, g5. So black is just wasting some moves. He don't really have a good plan. After hg5, g6, f6 will be like a little mistake, because you need to have an entry towards your king, and your both bishops should be free. So the logical continuation is fg, king g, bishop e4, king f7, and g6. After king e7, king g5, king d6, g7, bishop g8. Now I think the position is very clear and white can win. I will just show the game from here how the white wins. Okay, this is a good example on how to play Alpin counter gambit. White just try to be very cool and needs to learn much about the positionals on this Alpin counter gambit, where black really tries to seize the initiative, and most of the tactical players would like to play this Alpin counter gambit. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the example. See you in the next class.